Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today we're going to be discussing the different monetary systems that your nation can utilise.
This is how nations are built and empires are forged. For every nation that becomes integrated into the empire, for every territory that we acquire, for every citizen that joins us, for every drop of water we collect, for every seed that we sow, for every watt of energy we produce, for every silver bar that we stamp, we are securing our future.
Now, when it comes to the establishment of a monetary system for your nation, an argument can be made that if you're not looking to do something truly different from the conventional established nations of the world, then it really isn't worth doing. You're far better off simply utilising the monetary systems already in place in the host nation in which you are based, because this is going to be something that's going to take up a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of energy. So it needs to be worthwhile. And if you're not going to do something distinct and different, then it's really not worth doing at all. So a good place to start is going to be discussing what is the current established monetary system that the conventional nations of the world use, and they all use the same system. Its deviation is very minimal in between individual nation states. It's all cut and paste. It's all very much the same. And I could spend hours discussing the history of money and currency and then how this system is used in this day and age. But as a quick side note, I did have to significantly cut down the amount of time that I was going to use to discuss this because the length of the video was becoming simply untenable from my own perspective. So I did have to significantly reduce this, and I'm going to try to summarize this as best as I can, as concisely as I can. So something that's very, very important in this conversation, and something we really need to draw attention to before we discuss this too much, is this difference between money and currency, discussing the differences between the two and why those differences are so important. So currency is a unit of account and a medium of exchange. It is durable, it is divisible, it is portable, and it is fungible. Money is all of these things, but it is also a store of value for long periods of time. In this day and age, the nations around the world all use fiat currency. This is where governments and banks of established nation states go around creating currency, a medium of exchange, out of thin air. And then people will utilize that currency, believing that it has purchasing power. But that purchasing power only comes from people's belief that it has purchasing power. It comes entirely from faith. And this goes for the pound, the euro, the dollar, the yen, and all the rest of it. It is all a faith-based currency system. The problem with this system is pretty obvious. It gives the levers of power for this entire monetary system, of this entire nation, to a tiny number of bankers and politicians, perhaps the least trustworthy people in the world, and it gives them the ability to completely destroy the entire monetary system of that nation, and in doing so, not only causing immense economic turmoil and hardship for millions of people, but it also can lead to a complete and total societal collapse, and it can inevitably lead to the destruction of the nation itself. Now, this is because bankers and politicians do not have any restraint, in the sense that they are able and perfectly willing, as has been seen time and time again, to create virtually infinite amounts of currency, which destroys the value of the existing currency already in circulation. And this is the true definition of inflation. A lot of people wrongly believe that inflation is simply where the prices of goods and services are increasing. That is not inflation. That is merely a symptom of inflation. Inflation is where the currency supply is being oversaturated. More and more currency is entering the market, and the rising prices of goods and services are merely their way of trying to absorb that excess currency. And if this happens too quickly, as it has happened many times before across nations around the world, it can lead to something called hyperinflation. Now, hyperinflation is effectively inflation in overdrive. It's where when you see these news reports about 5% inflation, 10% inflation, that is really bad. But once it gets to hyperinflation, once the governments and the banks lose control of the monetary system in its entirety, once it runs away from them, once it can't be controlled, once they decide to flood the market with as much currency as possible in order to solve various problems that they're facing, that is when hyperinflation kicks in. And this is where prices will be increasing as a symptom of this, but they won't be increasing 5, 10, 20, 30% a year. In a lot of cases, they might be going up 100% a day. This is something that has happened before, and this is something that a lot of people should be extremely wary of, particularly in Western countries. If you look at Europe or the United States, for instance, people might think inflation is a bit of an inconvenience, in the sense that, yeah, you have 5%, 8%, 10% there, maybe a bit more, and day to day, you can potentially feel it. You can see the prices of goods going up, food, fuel, the price of maintaining your home. It's all going up very, very gradually. But there are hundreds of millions of people around the world that have gone through this, and much, much worse. To quote John Keynes when he was discussing inflation, "By this means, the government may secretly and unobserved confiscate the wealth of the people, and not one man in a million will detect the theft." So clearly, currency is not a store of value. It is constantly losing value on a very regular basis because governments and banks are constantly creating more of it. It may be typing it into a computer or printing it out, but every unit of currency that enters the circulating supply dilutes the value, the purchasing power of the currency that's already in the market. Now, if you think about this in a very logical way, you can see this throughout history. In the 1950s, within the United Kingdom, you could have purchased a house outright for £5,000. Think about what you can purchase for £5,000 today. But don't think too long, because in another 70 years, that same £5,000 is not going to be able to buy a pack of gum. This is what inflation is, and this is what the world is going to be like. More and more currency enters the circulating supply, the existing circulating supply becomes diluted, it loses the purchasing power, it pushes up prices, and it pushes people into poverty. Money, such as gold and silver, are the polar opposite of currency, in the sense that they have all the qualities, the characteristics of a currency. They are a unit of account, they are a medium of exchange, they are durable, they are divisible, they are portable, they are fungible, but they're also a store of value for long periods of time. and they are a store of value because when you have a monetary system based on gold and silver, you can't just create more out of thin air. You need to spend time and energy in trying to find it, to mine it, to refine it, and actually make it usable. But not only that, gold and silver are incredibly useful, practical commodities. We use them in fashion, we use them in industry, we use them in technology, we use them in medicine. And it's because of many of these factors that gold and silver have been valued by human civilizations across the world for thousands of years. And it is the reason that they still have purchasing power to this day. And it's for these reasons that gold and silver are often referred to as sound money, as commodity money, as real money. And that's not hard to see when you compare it to the thousands of currencies that we've had over the last few hundred years that have simply all failed. They've all gone to zero. Whereas gold and silver, when you hold a gold coin in your hand or a silver bar in your hand, there's a very good chance that that same gold and that same silver has been circulated 1,000 times over across thousands of years. It may have been melted down and forged into something else hundreds of times over, but it is something that is virtually indestructible. It is here to stay. And the fact that this commodity money, this real money, the sound money, fell out of favour had nothing to do with the fact that it wasn't a useful medium of exchange, but for reasons that I'm not going to get into here. It was because banks and governments, throughout recent history in particular, but throughout human history more generally, have hated gold and silver as a medium of exchange, specifically because it restricts their ability to spend. Now, as I say, I could talk about this for hours with a great deal of passion. I could talk about Electrum in ancient Egypt, the first coins, the staters in ancient Lydia. I could talk about fractional reserve banking. I could talk about the Bretton Woods system. I could talk about the lead up in the across human history as to how we got to this point. But I want to keep this as concise as I can so we can discuss the various options that your nation can look at in terms of establishing a monetary system for your own community, for your own society, and for your own civilization. But I'm hoping that this synopsis has nevertheless given you an idea of why it is important to distinguish between money and currency. So with that in mind, let's discuss some of the options in order of credibility that you can look at when trying to establish a monetary system for your nation. Now, first and foremost, to nobody's great surprise, you could go down the route of utilising sound money within your monetary system. That is to say, to utilise commodities like gold and silver for many of the reasons I've just discussed. They are relatively scarce. They are very useful, practical commodities. They are not something that governments, banks, institutions, or whatever else can create out of thin air. It is something that creates a great deal of internal stability for your nation and for your community. And this is very important. Now, if you think historically, humanity has used gold and silver as a medium of exchange for thousands of years. And there is a reason for that. And it's not because fiat currency is superior to gold and silver. It's because gold and silver is a means of protecting the wealth of the people, whereas fiat currency only benefits the few at the top who are pulling at the levers of power. And this is very important. If you are looking to establish a monetary system that is going to be a means of ensuring stability within your nation, not personally benefiting you, not personally profiting you, but something that is going to help everyone else around you, then this is the monetary system that you really want to consider looking at. And just to touch upon this a little bit more, there are three core reasons as to why establishing a monetary system that utilizes commodity money like gold and silver is the best way forward. The first is that it is a clear break from the established global monetary system that we all live in today. And that is important. It is something that distinguishes yourself from the others around you. You are a distinct, unique entity that is utilizing a monetary system that is completely different from the nations around you. Second, you are utilizing a money that is not only just valued between yourself and one other individual that happens to be a part of your nation, but you are also utilizing a money that has universal value. That is to say, everyone else around you, everyone else around the world values gold and silver much the same. In the sense that if you are exchanging a gold coin for however many potatoes, that person can take that gold coin and they don't have to just engage in an exchange with another member of your nation, because that's the only place where that money has value. If they really wanted to, they can go and spend that money elsewhere. Now, this brings me on to the third point, in that, true enough, you cannot slap a gold coin down in a lot of cases and actually purchase your weekly shopping or something to that effect. But you also can't do that if you're in the United Kingdom with dollars or euros. So that's a very moot point. But this third point that I wanted to highlight is that gold and silver are extremely convertible, in the sense that if you exchange a bunch of potatoes and you get a gold coin in return, then you can take that gold coin, and if you so wish, if you really had to, for whatever reason, you could take that to a dealer or the scrapman or whatever else, and you could slide across your gold coin, and you could be handed fiat currency, which you can then utilize to pay your bills or buy your shopping or whatever else, if you really had to. And that is important, because as we'll see in the other examples of monetary systems that other aspirant nations have been known to go down, this is the only one that actually has the ability to use a money, use a medium of exchange that actually has real world value, a universal value that goes far beyond the community that you're establishing. Now, when it comes to the actual gold and silver that you can utilize within your nation, a lot of nations do like to go down the route of trying to make it their own, in the sense that if you're going to go down the route of gold and silver being utilized within your monetary system, a lot of nations will be tempted to acquire gold and silver, to melt it down, to create coins and bars, or to buy plain bars or plain coins and then hallmark it themselves, which is a perfectly reasonable, rational thing to do. However, it is perfectly possible for you to simply use generic bullion from reputable dealers. It might be US Eagles, it might be Britannias, it might be whatever else. But if you can find reputable dealers that are going to give you pure gold and pure silver to work with, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what is stamped on it, because it is still gold and it is still silver. And that is the beauty of it. It is something that is universally valued, and it will have value regardless of what's stamped on it. In fact, quite contrary to what a lot of people would like to hear, is that if you do stamp your coins or bars, be they plain or be they made by you yourself, if you do make your own mark on them, it can devalue it, because people won't be as familiar with the markings, they won't be as resaleable. So often generic bullion and generic coins and bars are something that a lot of aspirant nations would do well to consider utilizing, at least initially, before they were able to take the necessary hit in utilizing their own money. Now, of course, there are a few drawbacks in utilizing gold and silver within a monetary system for your nation. The most obvious being that in order to make this work in a real, meaningful way, you do need to acquire a significant amount of gold and or silver. And for obvious reasons, this is quite a challenge for a lot of people. And the obvious solution to this is to gradually introduce this monetary system into your society, to utilize existing, established, conventional fiat currency, the pound, the euro, the dollar, whatever else, for the bulk of your exchanges, but to introduce gold and silver on a small scale initially, and just gradually build it up over time until you are in a position where you can make that transition in its entirety. But the important aspect of this is that you have decided to take that step. You have decided to start injecting real money, real wealth into your own community. And that is important. And you also have to remember that even when you acquire this gold and silver, and you are paying a premium for this gold and silver, that if it is being held onto for long enough, if you don't intend to part with it in quick succession, then it is extremely likely, as has been the case for the last 50 years or so, that the price, the value, the purchasing power of gold and silver will continue to climb and eliminate any premiums that you have paid in order to acquire it. It's just a matter of time. Now, if you're not going to have a monetary system that is based on the direct utilization of gold and silver, there are a lot of people out there that would be tempted to establish what's called a commodity-backed currency. That is to say, they perhaps have enough money, silver or gold, to have in a treasury of some sort. And then they may be tempted to instead issue paper notes, currency, as a medium of exchange, and tell people that this is exchangeable for such and such gold or such and such silver. As an example, let's say you have a nation or a community, and they have a 1 kilogram bar of pure silver. Okay, you can't do much with that in terms of using it as a medium of exchange because there's only 1 bar and there's 1,000 grams of it. It's quite an expensive unit. So what can you do? And a lot of people will go, well, what we'll do is we'll hold on to this 1 kilogram silver bar, and what we'll do is we'll issue 1,000 notes, 1,000 units, 1,000 mediums of exchange, and each of these notes will be a promissory note, and it will state that it is exchangeable for 1 gram of pure silver. So you have 1,000 notes, 1,000 gram bar, all's right with the world, right? Well, not quite. The first immediate problem that you have is that unless someone has all 1,000 units of that currency, you can't exchange any of it for that silver. In the sense that if someone, for whatever reason, managed to acquire 500 units of that currency, they still can't acquire the silver because the silver is still in 1 bar. So this system does not work on that front. But beyond this, there are many other problems that you need to consider. What's to stop that government from issuing more notes, more currency, more fiat into the system without having the additional silver to back it up? Who's to say that the currency that's in your hands is actually backed up by something? What if the government isn't responsible for creating that additional currency? What if that currency is somehow forged or manipulated or increased by a third party? Then whose currency is truly the redeemable currency in that situation? Going on beyond that, what happens if you have a falling out with the government of that nation? What happens if they go inactive, they delete their social media accounts and they disappear? What happens if in the time frame between you acquiring that currency and that situation arising, that you have been acquiring all of these notes on the assumption that you're going to be able to exchange it for silver, and you've been sending them goods or you've been providing them services, and they've been benefiting from this, and you're just creating this massive little stack of paper over here, the stack of paper which you think is going to be worth X amount of silver. What happens when that silver is not forthcoming? What happens when that wad of paper just becomes a wad of paper, and that is all you have to show for all of your time, your energy, your resources that you have exchanged for that? That is the real risk of a commodity-backed currency, because you have to have an immense amount of trust in the other party, and that other party may not only be trustworthy, but may not be around long enough for you to be able to cash in. Another so-called monetary system that a lot of people tend to utilize in certain circles is a monetary system that isn't based on any kind of sound money or commodity money or real money. They just dive straight into full-on fiat currency. And that is to say, they will either print out on their A4 printer a load of paper notes, they'll cut them out, maybe laminate them, maybe they'll use some fancy paper, but either way, they will declare that this has some kind of purchasing power, some kind of value, when in reality, it clearly does not. And they do this for a very simple reason. Either they do not understand at all what money is, what currency is, how they differ, or they do understand and they just don't care because they fall squarely into the realm of fantasy roleplay, where they're more interested in giving themselves and others around them various titles and medals and awards, as opposed to actually building a functional society with established monetary systems, or consider the economic system they're going to work under, or whatever else. It's all a bit of fun for them, and that's fine if that's what they want to do. But in terms of establishing a genuine monetary system for a genuine nation-building project, then you want to avoid at all costs creating a self-created fiat currency, because it has all of the disadvantages of a established conventional currency like the pound, the euro, the dollar, except it suffers from a very obvious fatal flaw in that, unlike all of those aforementioned currencies, that national currency will have absolutely no value to absolutely anyone, even and especially perhaps to those within that nation. As a side note, and something that perhaps a lot of people would do well to understand when they're establishing a monetary system, is that when you are engaged in that process, when you are considering how to go about establishing a monetary system for the nation that you are building, you simply have to ask yourself, honestly, a very simple question. Would I personally work for the rest of my life for whatever currency or for whatever money that I am proposing for the nation that I am building, for the community that I'm trying to establish? Because if you're not willing to work for the bits of paper that you've printed off on your A4 printer, or if you're not willing to work for bottle caps, if you're not willing to work for a commodity-backed currency that someone else has control over, then maybe you shouldn't go down that route. Now, I can honestly say that if it was a case of, should I work for gold and silver, or should I work for any of the other mediums of exchange that I've covered so far, I would quite happily, very willingly take gold and silver. In fact, as it happens, over the last 50 years, anyone that had the choice of being paid in gold or silver as opposed to some kind of fiat currency, the pound, the euro, the dollar, or whatever else, they would have been vastly, vastly better off being paid in gold and silver, especially gold, because the purchasing power of gold, the value of gold, has gone up exponentially by thousands and thousands of percent, whereas the purchasing power of the dollar, the pound, the euro, it has collapsed in that same time frame. So that is just something to think about going forward. Establishing a monetary system, just ask yourself a question. Would I work for this medium of exchange that I am proposing for my own nation? So we've covered the use of commodity money. We've covered the use of a commodity-backed currency. And we've covered the use of a self-created currency. And it should be pretty clear from this video as to which is the superior route to go down and the inevitable flaws of utilizing any kind of currency. But before I wrap things up a little bit further, I did want to briefly touch upon barter. Now, barter obviously isn't a monetary system in the sense that barter obviously is the antithesis of a monetary system. There is no medium of exchange in barter. That is what barter is. It is the exchanging of goods and services without that medium of exchange. I suspect that's the dictionary definition if I was to look it up. However, I did want to touch on this a little bit because this is something that I often get asked about. And the short answer when it comes to the question of whether or not barter is suitable for a new nation that's been established is yes, it can be used. It can be utilized on some level, especially on small localized levels. But if you're trying to create something more significant, more sophisticated, something a bit more than just 2 or 3 people, or perhaps a few more than that, then it really does pay to have a medium of exchange. And the reasons for that is something that I want to delve into now. So I'm going to go through an example of barter, an exchange that takes place. And I just want to use this as an example of why it is very inefficient and why it can be quite problematic in the sense that trying to promote commerce and enterprise and trade is very difficult if you're just utilizing a system of barter. So let's see if you can follow this. You have 4 people, person A, B, C, and D. Person A has a load of potatoes, but they want some carrots. Person B has carrots, but they don't want potatoes, they want eggs. Person C has eggs, but they don't want potatoes either. They want trout. Person D has trout. So person A has gone to person B, person C, and now person D. Now, person D does have trout, and if they didn't want potatoes, that's it. No exchange can take place whatsoever. But let's say, in this particular example, that they do want potatoes. So person A exchanges potatoes with person D for trout. And then person A takes that trout and goes to person C and gets the eggs. And then person A takes those eggs and goes to person B to get the carrots. Now, this is just for one item. Can you imagine if you were doing your weekly shop like this, with each individual item being exchanged for someone else that doesn't necessarily want what you have? And this is the problem with barter. This is what's called the coincidence of wants. That is to say, in order for a barter system to work, I need to meet with someone that has something that I want. But more than that, I need to have something that they want, and we need to be able to meet at the same place and at the same time. Now, if you're dealing, for instance, with perishable goods, this becomes infinitely more complicated because time is a factor in that equation. And beyond that, if you are trying to engage in multiple transactions, if it's not a singular item that you're after, but multiple items that you're after, then it becomes almost impossible to engage in any kind of engagement, in the sense that trade, commerce, and enterprise cannot be carried out seamlessly. And this is where a medium of exchange comes into play. If everyone around the table, if everyone in the society can agree that this particular medium of exchange, this unit of account, this can be traded in between all of these different people, then I could have not bothered with my potatoes. I could have taken this medium of exchange and simply purchased the carrots. And then that person could have taken that medium of exchange and they could have purchased the thing that they wanted. But the point is, you need that medium of exchange. You need that intermediary, that middleman, in order to make the transactions going in within your society, within your civilization, within your nation, far easier and far more seamless. The question has always been not whether or not it's better to have a barter system or a medium of exchange. It's definitely better to have a medium of exchange. The question is, what is the medium of exchange? Because as we've already discussed in this video, the difference between a money and a currency, for instance, is incredibly important. So if you're going to have a medium of exchange, and a medium of exchange is something that you should have, it needs to be something that will maintain its value, that will protect the wealth and well-being of the people that are using it. That is the benchmark of a civilization that is going to stand the test of time. In Stamaria, when we were first founded, we started utilizing generic silver bullion and then generic gold bullion. But we very quickly transitioned from generic silver bullion and generic gold bullion to the silver Stamarian stater coins and silver Stamarian stater bars, both of which feature Stamaria's name, its imagery, and even those of the member states of the empire. Now, this medium of exchange has been utilized within the empire and with our external trade partners. We have purchased products from others in exchange for silver Stamarian stater coins and silver Stamarian stater bars. This is one of the very few occasions which you will come across the actual utilization of a sound money. You'll never see it in the established conventional nations of the world. As I say, the use of the pound, the euro, the dollar, the yen, whatever else, all of this is fiat currency. It is not money. Now, as I alluded to earlier in this video, the term stater is actually derived from the Lydian stater that was utilized some 2,500 years ago. These were the first ever coins in human history, in the sense that there was gold and silver in circulation before then, but this was normally in the form of what's called electrum, whereas the stater was the first time that pure silver or pure gold coins, or as pure as they could make it at the time, were actually utilized, and they were actually measurable in the sense that you had entire stater coins and then they were broken into smaller denominations. And this is the first example of a true money being utilized, a true system in which a sound money could be utilized in a very meaningful way, and it made trade and commerce so much easier at that time. And this is why we have used the term stater ourselves, in order to pay homage to the ancient Lydians, to the ancient stater coin, the very first money in the world. Now, the actual value of the stater is very straightforward. 1 stater equals 1 gram of silver, in the case of a silver stater coin. If it is a gold stater coin, then it will be 1 gram of gold. So 1 stater is 1 gram. It's very, very straightforward, very simple stuff. And again, it just makes trade, commerce, and enterprise so much easier. And as more people become familiar with the value, the purchasing power of a gram of gold, that will become even more easy as time goes on. Now, putting every other aspect of Stamaria to one side, the monetary system alone makes Stamaria incredibly unique in the world, in the sense that we are the only nation, or certainly one of the few nations, excluding obviously the member states of our own empire, which also utilize sound money as a medium of exchange in a very real, meaningful, and direct way. But it is also something that has lent us a great deal of credibility. Because what we have been talking about since our foundation has come to fruition. It's happening as we speak. And this is not a surprise to us because it's been happening for decades at this point. And just to highlight this further, Stamaria was founded in June 2019. By the time we got to our 4-year anniversary in June 2023, as in a few months ago, the value, the purchasing power of silver had gone up by 60% in 4 years, whereas the value, the purchasing power of the British pound had fallen by 20%. Now, people ask me, why is this happening? And what should I do about it? And I can't really tell you more than what I've already told you in this video and many others like it. You need to be prepared. Fiat currency is a scam. It is a way of stealing the wealth of the people from under our own noses. As John Kane said, not one man in a million will detect this theft, but it is my hope that by discussing these sorts of issues as openly as I can to as many people as I can, that more people will become prepared for this eventuality, for this inevitability, because this is going to happen. The collapse of the global monetary system based on faith, based on fiat currency, it's all going to happen at some point. And you don't need to believe me personally to understand this. You just have to look at what's happening today. And always remember that a nation without sound money is destined to fall. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you wanted to show your support for Stamaria, then please feel free to give this video a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.